I didn't break the planet. It was this way when I found it, all right?
Everybody laughed when I first said I wanted to be a comedian. Well, they're not laughing now, are they?
You know why it's nominated, don't you? To catch the tears of joy.
It's a Celtic phoenix. People are thankfully being stupid again.
Welcome to Gurus of Comedy.
With your host, Dave Keeshan.
And welcome to Gurus of Comedy. I am here today with Sheila Conlin, based out of Los Angeles. Thank you, Sheila, for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Sheila is the CEO, no less, of the Conlin Company, which specializes in casting for reality TV shows. Quite a few are very popular. Did a lot of the American versions of the Gordon Ramsay shows, Kitchen Nightmares, Hotel Hell, and Hell's Kitchen, and a few others. At one point, you were a tour manager for Phyllis Diller. Could you tell us about that a little bit?
Oh my goodness. Yes. There's so much I can talk about. So working with Miss Diller was one of the great highlights of my life. Amazing experience. She truly, huge talent and great woman also. She was much more than a comedian. I mean, she was one of the first female comedians, but she was also a concert pianist. She was a beautiful painter, an artist. And just this woman just gave me so many great life lessons when I was on the road with her.
When were you on the road with her, and for how long was that?
I believe it was about 4 years. And I'm trying to go back to, I'm really bad at dates. I was back in, I think the late 80s, early 90s,
Close
or
enough.
somewhere in there. I always forget. She was 72 when I started working with her. And it was great. We ended up, when I joined to work with her, she was still doing the big stages. So she would do shows with like Norm Crosby, Paul Reiser, Steve Landisberg, really big stage shows, corporate shows. And that was with her traditional show, the big fright wig, the big costume, and, to a crowd of many where, she liked to have the spotlight on her eyes so she couldn't see the audience. She'd get up on stage and she, would do her act, but she didn't want to see faces in the crowd, right? So and during my rehearsals, I had to hire play on and play off musicians because she had that. And then to make sure that the spotlight would be straight in her eyes and she would get up and do her act. Well, during the course of the time that I was with her, it started to be the big movement of the comedy clubs. And all these comedy clubs were opening, even the big names in comedy were now doing comedy clubs. And her manager said, look, we need to get Miss Diller's act worked out so she could do some of the smaller clubs. And so she and I worked on her material to try and pare it down to how will it work in a more intimate setting. And so that was a challenge, and it was also exciting to be able to do that.
Could you detail a little bit what would the difference would be?
Well, the difference would be it's like when she was up there doing the big show, I'll call it, it was pretty much formula, one joke or one punchline after another, right? And so the timing and the pacing is very different on a small stage. So we had to pick and choose which of the jokes, which of the stories are going to work. And of course, for the small stage, we didn't have the play on, play off musicians. So we had to create a different intro for her, as well as what she was going to wear, because the big fright wig and the costume really wouldn't play off on a small stage.
Okay, that's interesting. Because Steve Martin details a bit about how he started wearing a white suit because he was just lost on this massive stage and he wanted to make sure people could see him.
Right. I also worked with Steve Martin
when I
was a comedy agent. He was one of the comedians that I worked with. He's amazing. Oh my God, I can't even say enough about him.
Okay, that might be another conversation.
I know, but with Miss Diller, it was a little challenging for her because now she's able to see people right in front of her. And so when the first time she was doing her first 3-week gig at the Rainbow Room in New York City. That was this first small stage that she did. And it she had a little bit of difficulty in it because she can now see people. And, in a comedy club or in an intimate setting like the Rainbow Room was, which is somewhat like a cabaret room, you can see people talk to each other, they're having a drink. And it really threw her off for the first few shows because she's like, they're talking, they don't like me. This is great, and I had to reassure her, no, Miss Diller, this is just how it is. You just need to focus. So I would stand at the back of the room, and of course, we had as many lights as we could on her, but she would focus on me in the back of the room. And I would just try and hold, say, just to stare at me and tell me, do your show to me. So it worked. And, obviously she's a pro and she got better and better at it, but it was a big transition for her.
Wow, that's quite, because I believe she started quite late in life. I think she was in her late 30s even before she went performing
Yeah.
to start with. So
Yes.
I'm not too sure if she kind of would have started in the small clubs in the first place. When she did start, she came out of the gate storming.
Oh, she did. Yes, definitely. I think she did some of the music venues way back when, like the Copacabana and things like that. I think those were some of the platforms or stages for comedians. But no, traveling with her was amazing. She was very big on handwritten thank you letters. So every city we would go to, and anybody that helped us, whether it be in the airport, the airline personnel, to people that drove us to and from the venues, the hotel people, she was big on. She would give me a list. We would always collect everybody's business cards, and then she would write on it if we were sending them one of her books or another book that she really loved. She loved this book called The Magic of Believing. And so I would make sure that she would sign autograph photos, and handwritten, she would handwrite out a thank you. And so any city that we would go to, the part of my job was the follow up afterwards to send out these handwritten thank yous in a book or a photo, or whatever she wanted to send them. So very personalized. She was very grateful and happy for people when they, were super nice to us, which, everybody was. Um, the one really interesting thing working with her is when I first started, she goes, "Yo, you're very Irish." And I said, "Yes." And so she goes, "Here's a little gift. This is something I want you to bring with you. Bring every time we travel. So make sure you pack this." So I open it up, and it's this big coffee mug with shamrocks on it. And then one of those metal hot water heaters where you plug into an outlet and you stick it in, the cup with the hot water and it heats it up. And then packets of, like the ramen noodles and oatmeal and just different things that you can heat up in water. And I'm like, "Miss Diller, this is great, but what is this?" Where she goes, "You will never know where we may end up, and we may not be able to get food. So we'll always have this food to eat if we're stuck in the middle of nowhere." And I thought that was really interesting. She had grown up in the Depression, and it was something that was really important to her to make sure that we always would have food no matter where we'd go.
Well, that's interesting. Well, I lived in America for a while, for about 2 years, and I used to die trying to get a cup of tea. I just couldn't get hot water anywhere. I hadn't to find a microwave somewhere that had microwave water. It was like, there's a
Right.
microwave over here in that building. I'm going to go over. So it's just coffee in America is huge. Coffee.
Yes, we have coffee all the time. I'm drinking my coffee now.
I kind of want to get more into detail of your casting work you did on Gordon Ramsay's work. So there was two shows you worked on, was The Kitchen Nightmares and Hell's Kitchen, and from what I can tell, they were both shows that started in the UK first. Now, I
Yes.
particularly would have seen The Kitchen Nightmares one, the UK version first, and then I saw the American one, and I was quite taken by like how the shows, they're not exactly the same. And I particularly feel like this is how they were picked. Like in the UK ones, there was a feeling that these restaurants could be successful again, that they just had some fundamental problem, whereas the American ones seem to be, these were in really bad shape. They could be out of business in a week type of bad.
Right.
What is that a fair assessment, or like how
So,
did you get there?
Yeah, and it's so first I'll start with let's start with Hell's Kitchen because that started first.
Right.
So Hell's Kitchen was successful in the UK, and Marco Piero White was the first one on it, and then Gordon started doing it, and it was pretty straightforward. They would put everybody through the paces and see who the winner is, and they'd go to work with Gordon or in a restaurant or whatever. In the US, we had to adapt it to the US sensibility, and we really were looking for the diamonds in the rough, the prep cooks, the ones that may never have a shot or have a more difficult shot at getting their own restaurant down the road, but we had some really great talent. So, our criteria on the first season, we took anybody, even like a home cook, but we realized first season that that's not really going to work. We did okay with it, and there was a couple people that stood out. But what we realized is like this is really intense, and the training that Gordon puts them through, and the paces he puts them through, they really need to have restaurant experience, prep cook, line cook, all of those good things. So by second season, that was our criteria. And we went out and found these people that had these great hidden talents, or, something that could be turned into a learning curve on a better, cooking scale. And so we went after all over the US and brought them together. And it was really exciting. It was great. He taught them a lot. He's very difficult in the kitchen, but difficult in a good way. The bar was high. If you can't make food that is good and presentable and almost, it's got to be perfection, because you could kill someone if you serve bad food, or it's old, or it's awful, or, people paying money for this. So his standards are really high. And that's what I loved about that show. And everyone that participated, no matter if they failed or won or whatever, they had an amazing experience. And he truly cares.
Just to kind of go back to that a bit. So I don't know what you would think would be the modern model of where reality TV show comes from. Like, I would point to The Real World on MTV in the early 90s as a kind of a very thing that people would have at least seen and kind of understood, probably because it was so cheap. Camcorders were coming along, you could kind of get in there. But they definitely seem to pick their archetypes. This is the kind of country Christian, and this is the kind of, out queer person, and we put them together, and we're really looking for the conflict, because we know we put them in a pot for 2 or 3 weeks, someone's going to blow. Is that part of the casting process for these shows as well, or is that?
This is how I look at it, because I was the one to start the whole casting process from the very beginning, when reality really hit. And yes, I would say one of the progenitors to reality was The Real World. And that was, to me, more like a social experiment, where it was taking these young kids from different walks of life, different areas, different personalities, and put them in a house to see how they would, get along with each other, who would hook up with each other, is there a connection, that type of thing. So I really call that like social experiment. The other progenitor to reality was kind of like Unsolved Mysteries, real people telling their real stories.
That show's back recently as well, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But when Hell's Kitchen came along, and this is my process and my theory on this. I've been challenged before many times, one by Dr. Phil when I was on his show, saying that, oh, how you do your casting, you find these specific people, the gay one, the angry one, this one. And I said, no, that's not how I look at people. That's not how I look at real people to bring them on a TV show. I said, for Hell's Kitchen, they all have to have one criteria in common: a passion for cooking, and they have had to work on the line or in prep or in a restaurant. So those were tried and true. They had to have that. As far as the next step in choosing the people, yes, each person has a wide range of emotions. We all do. We all have them. And it depends on what situation that we're in. What's going to push our buttons? How is it going to happen? What kind of people that we may not get along with? All of those things. But I look at a person when I'm casting as a whole. And to me, I don't want to pick a one note person. I want to see that they have everything. Emotion, where they what makes them sad, what makes them happy, what makes them angry. And I will never present anyone in my casting that only has one note, that I can't get anything else out of them.
Well, the way I look at it a tiny bit, I don't know if you're familiar with poo sticks or marble racing. You have to pick the best thing you can, but once you set them off, they're on their own. You've made your choices. They kind of are off to do whatever they want, and it's your choices of the situation are no longer yours anymore. So
Right.
your job up front is very important, because that's the only point you can do that job. And then once they're let out, it's kind of, oh God, I hope I made the right choice or not.
No, exactly. And to me, because there's been several shows where people cast that way, and it's inevitable. It'll fall short because you end up with one person that's the same thing you're going to get out of them over and over. And you don't see any story arc. You don't see any development one way or the other. Someone that will actually end up completely falling apart, or someone who will overcome a huge obstacle and break through. And to me, that's exciting and interesting television. When you're just casting people and only giving them storylines or guide or situations where they can only show one side of them, to me, it's you're failing, and it proves that. That's where a lot of shows I feel don't have good casting. So I always made sure that these people had that. They all had the well-roundedness, and they could tap into any of those motions at any time, depending on the situation they're put in.
Interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with the UK TV show called Grand Designs.
No, I'm not.
It's kind of one of these house renovation ones. I'm surprised it hasn't made it to the US. It's like they've got Australian ones and New Zealand ones, but it's never got to the US. But the guy who presents it, he's a big hero in our house. Kevin McLeod. He did a presentation in Sydney, and he was telling the crowd that, when they're picking people to, like, it's essentially like a house that is some type of major thing. So it's not like, you put an extension on the house. It's usually like you knock through an old house or you build it from scratch, that type of stuff. And they said they go out of their way to not pick, really rich people, because they can buy themselves out of any problem. So there's no drama. So they have to pick somewhere down the line that they have a chance of being successful, but there has to be a chance of failure too, because they want that kind of drama on the show as well. You kind of see it. And then I've seen the Australian one. I don't think they hewed quite to the same model. They had a lot of people that could kind of buy their way out of the problems, more so than the UK version. And it wasn't quite as watchable,
Right. Well, I always say, to me, like the Hell's Kitchen, and especially when it's a competition, you have to be broken down to be built up.
Right.
And you got to break through. There's got to be a breakthrough. You can't just be someone who whizzes through and it's like, I'm perfect at everything. It doesn't work. There's got to be the challenges. You've got to work hard at it. Competition is hard in any genre. So you have to make sure someone can go through those different paces to get there. Kitchen Nightmares is absolutely one of my favorite shows. And then later on we did Hotel Hell, which was very similar, but based in a hotel instead of just a restaurant.
I haven't seen the hotel one, but I always felt the kitchen one was very much his show, in terms of, it was his world and he knew it so well.
Oh, it was so good. So how it happened was there was the UK version, and that was more of like, I believe it was like one camera. They shot for maybe 3 days. It happened really quick, where someone on his team would be like, okay, found these restaurants. They're having some issues right now. And then within 3 or 4 days, Gordon and his crew with one camera show up and they try and fix the situation. Is it the menu? Is it an employee? Is it all of the above? But for adapting it to the US sensibility, we were like, that's not really going to work for us. And besides, Gordon's doing Hell's Kitchen. So we can't, we had to start figuring out, timing and scheduling.
Oh, they were filmed side by side, were they?
Yeah, he would do Hell's Kitchen and then he'd go right into Kitchen Nightmares.
Right. Okay. I didn't realize they were side by side. I thought he'd do one after the other or something.
Kind of. So once Hell's Kitchen was in post and getting all that done, he was already starting on Kitchen Nightmares. So I would finish casting Hell's Kitchen and I'd go right into casting Kitchen Nightmares.
So what is the difference of the casting there? That I'm really curious about that one.
The criteria was like, a mom and pop restaurant, either a family business or, the family business where they wanted to do the passing of the torch. The younger kids are now getting older and they want to move the older parents out and they want to take over and refresh things, make it newer. But the older the parents are fighting them to do it. So there's an issue there. Or just, regular mom and pop restaurant where they're having issues with the employees, stealing, sabotage, this or that. It came down to menu. How do they run it business wise?
So how would you find that out? Would you have to kind of go on site and shadow them for like a few days to kind of get a feel for that?
No, it was interesting. I mean, I would go visit them in person to do the interviews. So I would have a huge team. Or I shouldn't say huge. There was like 2 or 3 different teams. And then eventually I just really started doing a lot of it myself with a couple people with me because it was important to be there face to face and to see them and to be in that restaurant. I wouldn't shadow them for any length of time, but I would do very in-depth interviews with the owners individually. And then I would do it as a group and I would see the kind of like a group therapy. I would hold like
Great.
group therapy. That was my casting interview. But I had to be very careful not.
Yeah, you didn't want to fix any problems, I'd say, did you?
Right. And it was challenging because a lot of times that's also my personality too. It's like, I know how to fix it. Or I like, hey, you should do this. But I had to hold back and really get it out. Then the most challenging thing was we had to put them through, you go through application, you go through an interview, then you have to go through a background process and all of that. So it could be weeks, it could be months before they were even approved until we could get our production schedule on board and have them filmed. So I would have to hold the hands of either the employees and the owners going, don't fire them yet. Don't do this. Don't quit yet. Don't change anything yet. And it was really challenging for them because they were having issues. They were losing money. They weren't getting customers. Things weren't happening. And these people would hang in with us for a long time until Gordon could eventually get there to do the filming. And unfortunately, it became too late for some of them. By the time we filmed, by the time it made it on air, that they had changed, they couldn't survive. So backtrack, and to answer your other question, when I would go in, I also did like their accounting forensics. I had to go in and figure out who all their vendors, how much in debt were they, where were they losing money. I mean, I did a whole, like I said, forensic accounting. It was like a whole book, a story on this family from beginning to where they were at that moment we were casting.
This is for Gordon, that he would kind of have a...
Yes. A lot of times you wouldn't see on air the financial stuff, because that wasn't as, it was important, but, we really tackled the personality issues, the authority issues, how they ran it, and the food, of course.
I was in Australia one time when they were trying to film Wife Swap, that they wanted to do some event where they had someone in the team of in the Wife Swap group that was going to perform comedy. It was kind of like going to be a storyline, and we were told they were coming into a club, and then at the very last minute they cancelled, and then they kind of something went wrong, and then we found out that the entire episode had to be canned. They'd gotten quite far through it, and it had such a conflict that even though they'd started filming, they had to throw it away. Would that happen much with the Kitchen Nightmares, that you'd even get as far as filming and have to throw it away?
No,
Never. Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me just make sure. Never. I mean, no. First of all, it's like I was very buttoned up, and our process and our system was really tight. Once we approved them and they made it through whatever background process we put them through, we were on. Now, we always would shoot like an alternate in case something would happen, and then we would, have another restaurant to put into the episode lineup. But I'm trying to think. I can't. The only episode I remember that was sort of through us was the one with Amy's Baking Company out of Arizona, where Gordon sat down and he's looking at her and Sammy, the 2 owners, and he just goes, I can't help you. I just can't help you. And we were all like, oh my God, this is crazy. But it also worked because it was authentic. He was trying to help them and they just wouldn't listen, to the point where he goes, okay, I don't know what to do. And it became one of the most popular episodes ever.
So he got a full 60 minutes, even though he said he could do nothing out of it.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, there is a true story.
They challenged him over and over, and he was like, well, I don't know. So no, it was great. It was absolutely great. And those were real problems they were having. So to me, my whole basis is to be as authentic as possible. And when you have that and people are uninhibited and they're going to give you your all, that makes for a great show.
And can I talk about 2 other shows you casted for? I think you did The True Beauty. You're involved in that one.
Yes.
And I Want to Marry Harry, which I haven't seen.
Oh, I love both of those.
I think both of those shows kind of played into a conceit that the contestants themselves didn't know what the audience knew.
Right. Which was a very fine line for me to walk, because I am also very transparent and truthful. I'm an advocate for the real people I put on the shows, but I'm also am responsible to deliver the network and the production company what they need. Mm-hmm. So in going into those 2 things where we couldn't tell them exactly what the show is, but we did it in a way where what we were saying to them was truth. And what we were doing.
So you're Irish after all. It was sort of true. It was sort of true. I wasn't lying.
Right. So, and that was at the height of, the times when the little bit more sensationalized reality shows. But it was also, I don't know, everybody that was on those shows had a great time. And surprised to see, the end, or the twist, as we call it, the twist.
Did you ever hear of the one that was on the UK, Space Cadets?
Space Cadets, yes.
Yeah, where they convinced some 9 people that they actually put them into space. And they thought they were in space, even though they had gravity, and says, this is what's called near space, not in outer space. And
right, near space. You can, even on like Hell's Kitchen or any of the dating shows, mm-hmm. If you're sequestering people, and they have no contact with the outside world. They don't see anything on the internet, the news, the newspapers, nothing. We put them in this bubble. And I mean, that's why The Bachelor works so well. They're in such a bubble that their world is completely different. And right. It's easy to convince them of what's happening.
So how would that in the I Married Harry case? So was there issues with some people beginning to think that he wasn't the real deal, or what? How was that dealt with?
Yeah, because we flew them all over to London and they were filming there. So they think they were meeting, which was our premise. You're going to meet someone who is, a big fish, a great catch, someone amazing. And so that hype and that excitement, and then you go fly them to London, you put them up in a castle. And then what we would do is we would do little setups where they would look out the window and they would see a helicopter landing and, this guy getting out, and they're like, oh my God, from afar, he looked like Prince Harry, or like these different sightings. So now we're sort of getting their brain, worked up and going, it's got to be him. Well, who else could it be? It looks like him. And then when they meet him, he did look very similar to him. I have to say, I did a good job on that.
Yeah. Very good.
He literally, Matt, that's his name. We did a little test with him. We brought him to Los Angeles, and my assistant, Tim, took him out in Venice and Santa Monica for a night. And they were stopped a million times, and they got the looks and the whispers that they thought he was Prince Harry. And so we knew, it was like, okay, that was a good test. We knew that, this can work with him. But yeah, for the girls, of course, everybody will have a doubt here and there, but you keep them so busy, and you keep them excited about, oh my God, you're going on a date with him, or he wants to see you, and however we did all of that. And they get caught up in the whirlwind. So it's easier to go like, wow, this is really happening.
So you are like an actual big fish in the reality TV show, so much so you've actually lectured overseas. I think it says you did a masterclass in Rome, and you've even gone to China to give a lecture there, or to talk with TV stations there. What is reality TV show in China like?
Oh my God, that was a great learning experience. In China, very, very different. Their shows would last 2, 3 hours, their so-called reality. And here's what they would do as well. They would get real people to audition, but they would have the real people not be themselves. They would give them like a different name and character criteria, and they would tell them to be that person. So it's very strange, very, very strange. But however, that's how it was. And when I was going over there to do all these lectures and to help, they really wanted to learn how to do the American way of reality TV. So I traveled with Paul Jackson, who used to run Granada TV, ITV. He and I would go over there and he would talk about programming in the bigger picture. And then I would talk about, the development, creating a show and the casting. So it was interesting to learn that they would do it this way. And they would be so long because they felt like nobody wanted to really know the real person. They thought they had to create these larger than life characters out of real people. So as we went through and would teach or lecture, they were like, oh, now we get it. But it's very different for their culture.
Is that something to do with what maybe their audience expects as opposed to what they can do themselves?
Yes, because they were moving into that territory and it was all more scripted type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what they started doing during the time we were there as well, they had already been licensing shows like Take Me Out, which is another one that I had done for Fox. And it was very popular over there. But their show, again, lasted like 3 hours. But they were taking real people and having them matched up with each other. And I believe they were starting to do American Idol. They were doing different variations of things. But they were licensing those shows from the US or the UK. And they had some help in trying to figure that out, right? But what we were doing, we went to BTV, SMG, which is Shanghai Media Group, Nanjing TV, Hunan TV, Shenzhen TV, and they were really wanting to learn how to do this. We started to develop a couple of shows with them over there and to help them figure out this new process. It was very difficult. It was a little bit comical.
Well, I've been on sensitivity training to deal with Asian customers. I understand how the American style would not fly well with the Asian style.
Yeah, it was one of the best. I mean, I was over there twice on these lectures and tours and seminars, and it was phenomenal. Though, I mean, they take care of you really well. And
did they take anything from it? Did they actually start applying some of the stuff, or they go, "Oh, we've heard what you said. We're doing it this way"?
Yeah. They did. They also like to try and to just copy your process. So I have a couple of IPs, my own intellectual property on how I do things and my system and my structure and how I lay things out. And of course they wanted all that. And they didn't want to pay for that. And they want you to give them everything for free.
I work in engineering, so we've had experience with that side of Chinese life as well.
Yeah. And if you don't, they just take it anyway. They find a way. I mean, they wanted me to plug my computers into certain things here and there. And it was a little tricky at times.
Did you actually find anything over there that you thought about taking back to America?
There was one that I really liked. We were developing one called Love Train in Shenzhen, and it was about getting married on a train. And I really liked the concept. We started to develop it. It didn't end up happening there. And then I was going to bring it back here. And I can't remember. This was quite a few years ago, but I never fully developed it. But it's funny you mention it because I just pulled it up, a couple weeks ago. And it's sitting on my desk to look at again.
Right.
So you never know. We might have...
Well, on a train with lockdown, maybe there's something there, You all go onto a train for 14 days. You're all isolated. Then we can start.
Right.
Just going backwards and forwards across America.
And trains would be better than planes right now.
Yeah, there you go. So, okay. Go for it.
Right. Yes.
So you mentioned that you're working on a few things right now. What is that you can speak about and give us a heads up on?
Sure. Well, one of my shows is now on Netflix called Skin Decision. And it's a fabulous show to learn about the art of plastic surgery and whether to cut or not cut. There's so many new techniques, tools, in both arenas of cutting or non-cutting. I have two great doctors, Nurse Jamie, who does most of the non-cutting, and then Dr. Sheila Nazarian, who is a plastic surgeon, board certified. They show all these great techniques, and we help people through problems that they've had, whether through an accident or just in general, where you let yourself go. And the whole premise is to just explain to everybody, or to teach everybody, it's okay to want to improve yourself. And sometimes we just can't do it through diet, exercise. Age is age. Aging, things happen. And there's some safe procedures out there that can help everybody out. So it's doing really well. I'm happy about that. And our stories are great. And then I'm working on a documentary that I just sold to Hulu, and it's really exciting. I can't really say more than that, but hopefully that will be on the air on Hulu. I'd say probably maybe this year, next time, or earlier.
But best of luck with that. I'll have to keep an eye out. And how's what has been your work process during this lockdown? How about it? Like, you're based in California, so you've had one of the worst lockdowns in the States.
Yes, it's been a little challenging. I was working on a Lifetime show called Flipping Families, so we were able to go through the casting process. We're waiting now to see if we can start shooting it, but found some amazing families.
Because I imagine a lockdown and reality TV shows really don't play well together. There's only so much you can do socially distancing, You stand over there, you stand over there.
Right. Especially the dating shows. You can't really hang out together, right? No, it's been challenging. I think things are lifting and getting a little bit better. And of course, we are creative people in the entertainment industry. We will find different ways to make these things work. So everybody's been putting their heads together to figure this out.
Well, wonderful. So I'd like to thank you for coming on today, Sheila. Great Irish name. And I've been your host, Dave Keeshan, and we will be on again. Thank you. Goodbye.